Welcome to the Echo Lab, the place where music's best-kept secrets come to light. In every episode, we uncover the overlooked legends, the underground classics, and the hidden influences that shape the soundtrack of generations. From cult bands and iconic session players to the untold stories behind timeless tracks. If you're a fan of deep cuts and deep dives, you're in the right place. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss a beat. Let's get into the story behind the sound. Chuck Mangione, Beyond the Feel So Good. When you think of Chuck Mangione, what comes to mind? Maybe it's that smooth, soaring melody of Feel So Good, floating through late-night radio or echoing in a movie soundtrack. Or maybe it's the sight of him on stage, smiling, eyes closed, hugging his Flugelhorn like an old friend. But Chuck Mangione is more than one song. Much more. He was a child prodigy, a jazz pioneer, a crossover genius, an artist who built an entire career on joy and emotional connection in music. And he did it all without selling out or chasing trends. This is the story of Chuck Mangione, a man who made us feel so good, and left a legacy most people barely know. Let's start at the beginning. Chuck Mangione was born on November 29, 1940, in Rochester, New York, into a tight-knit Italian-American family. His neighborhood was a blue-collar world filled with the smells of homemade sauce, the sounds of church bells, and the rhythm of a city that never stopped moving. Music wasn't just background noise, it was woven into everyday life. Chuck and his older brother Gap were surrounded by music from the get-go. Their father, Frank, wasn't a musician himself, but he was a fan, a big one. He took the boys to see Dizzy Gillespie at a local club when Chuck was still a kid. That moment changed everything. Gillespie wasn't just a performer, he was a magician, and Chuck was hooked. By the time he was 8, Chuck had picked up the trumpet. He wasn't just dabbling, either. He was practicing constantly, already showing signs of a tone and feel beyond his years. By high school, he was a standout talent, leading bands, writing charts, and already dreaming bigger than Rochester. Here's something a lot of people miss. Chuck Mangione wasn't just about easy listening or smooth jazz. His foundation was hardcore bebop. He studied at the Eastman School of Music, one of the top conservatories in the country, where he sharpened his chops, composed serious jazz pieces, and learned to respect the roots of the genre. In 1958, while still a teenager, Chuck and his brother Gap formed a bebop group called the Jazz Brothers. These guys weren't just local acts. They were the real deal. They recorded several albums with Riverside Records, the same label that had Thelonious Monk and Bill Evans on their roster. Chuck played trumpet. Gap was on piano, and together they tore through bop standards and originals with energy and polish. But even then, Chuck was different. He had this melodic instinct that set him apart from the more angular, technical jazz players of the day. He wasn't afraid to let a note breathe, to let emotion guide the solo instead of speed. That approach would eventually define his signature sound. So here's where things start to shift. In the mid-1960s, Chuck Mangione began exploring beyond the hard edges of bebop. He was still a jazz guy at heart, but he started reaching for something warmer, more lyrical, and that's when he picked up the Flugelhorn. If the trumpet is a shout, the Flugelhorn is a hug. It's mellow, velvety, more introspective. And once Chuck made the switch, it became like an extension of his own voice. He wasn't just playing anymore, he was speaking in a language that hit people right in the heart. After a brief stint with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, yep, that Art Blakey, Chuck returned to Rochester in the late 60s and took a job at Eastman School of Music, the same school where he had studied. But this was a step backward. It was a creative launching pad. He started experimenting with fusing jazz, classical, and pop elements. Albums like Friends and Love weren't just records, they were experiences. That album was recorded live with the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra and mixed orchestral arrangements with jazz improvisation. It was bold, ambitious, and totally Chuck. Critics didn't know what to do with it, but fans loved it. Mangione wasn't playing by the rules. He was chasing beauty, connection, vibe. And let's talk about vibe. More than technical skill or theory. Chuck Mangione was a master of mood. His music didn't demand attention. It invited it. Songs like Hill Where the Lord Hides became unexpected hits. Imagine that. A flugelhorn-driven, mostly instrumental jazz track making waves on the Billboard charts in the early 70s. It wasn't supposed to happen, but Chuck made it happen. By the mid-70s, his reputation as a boundary breaker was solid. He signed with A&M Records and released a string of critically respected, commercially successful albums. His band included top-tier musicians, bassist Charles Meeks, drummer James Bradley Jr., guitarist Grant Geisman, and keyboardist Bill Reichenbach, among others. They weren't just sidemen. They were family. And you could feel that chemistry in every note. Then came 1977. 1977 was the year Chuck Mangione crossed over from jazz staple to mainstream sensation. That was the year he released Feel So Good. And if you're already humming the melody in your head, you're not alone. It's one of the most instantly recognizable instrumental tracks in American music history. But what's wild? It wasn't supposed to be a massive hit. Chuck wrote Feel So Good almost as an afterthought, a closing track to wrap up a mellow, mood-driven album. But once it hit the airwaves, something clicked. People couldn't get enough of that smooth Flugelhorn line, those effortless grooves, and that slightly nostalgic, soaring melody. It was jazz, sure, but it had pop sensibility. It was complex, but catchy. It felt, well, so good. The single topped the adult contemporary charts and even cracked the Billboard Hot 100's top 5, a huge deal for an instrumental. At a time when punk was exploding and disco ruled the clubs, Chuck Mangione was filling arenas with a flugelhorn. And here's a fun fact most people don't know. Feel So Good was one of the first jazz fusion albums to go multi-platinum. That wasn't just rare, it was unheard of. From there, Chuck became a full-blown cultural icon. He was everywhere. Guest spots on talk shows, a string of albums that blended smooth jazz, pop, and orchestral elements, and even composing music for major events like the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. That piece, Give All You Got. Another total jam. Bright, inspiring, and absolutely Chuck. But here's the thing. For all the commercial success, Chuck Mangione never chased fame. He was, and always remained, a humble, soft-spoken guy from Rochester who just loved making beautiful music. He didn't care about genre lines. He didn't care what jazz purists said. He just wanted to move people. And he did. Over and over again, as the 80s rolled in, Chuck Mangione didn't slow down. He kept composing, touring, and putting out lush, emotionally rich records. His sound evolved, adding more orchestral elements here, going more intimate there. But the heart of his music remained the same: warmth, joy, and connection. Even as musical trends shifted, Chuck never really faded. He just kept doing his thing, staying true to that unmistakable Mangione tone. Smooth, lyrical, and unmistakably his. By the late 80s and into the 90s, he wasn't topping charts like he used to, but his influence was everywhere, in smooth jazz, adult contemporary, film scores, and even hip-hop samples. And then came a whole new wave of recognition. From a most unlikely place, King of the Hill. That's right. The long-running animated sitcom turned Chuck Mangione into a cult comedy icon. He played a fictionalized version of himself, flugelhorn in hand, always popping up with Feel So Good in the background, and fans loved it. It was both hilarious and oddly fitting. Even in cartoon form, Chuck Mangione felt like an old friend. What made that show Cameo so genius wasn't just a joke. It was how endearing it was. Chuck leaned into the gag with genuine humor and humility. He wasn't just in on the joke. He was the joke, and he embraced it with the same laid-back energy that made his music timeless. And that's really the heart of his legacy. Chuck Mangione never tried to be cool. He didn't posture, didn't chase trends, didn't try to fit in. He just wrote melodies that felt good, music that didn't need words to move you. And in doing that, he connected with generations across styles, backgrounds, and decades. Today, Chuck's influence lives on not just in jazz circles, but in pop, indie, film scores, and even meme culture. His music has been sampled by hip-hop producers. Feel So Good still pops up in commercials, shows, and nostalgic playlists. And among musicians, he's revered for doing the impossible, making instrumental music that actually broke through. So when we think about Chuck Mangione, the Flugelhorn, the bucket hat, that grin, we're not just thinking about a sound. We're thinking about a feeling, a warmth, a groove, a moment. He made jazz fun, made it accessible, and never lost sight of its soul. Chuck didn't just make music. He made memories. And honestly, it still feels so good. Rest in peace, Chuck Mangione. Your music lives on, in joy and brass, in every smile it brings. Thanks for hanging out with the Echo Lab. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app or watching on YouTube, we appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and drop a review or comment to let us know what you think. Got a band, topic, or a deep cut you want featured? Shoot us a message. Until next time, this is the Echo Lab, where we dive into the story behind the sound.